Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Fringe North podcast. My name is Caitlin Townsend. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the project coordinator for this year's festival. And I have with me here today Carlyn. Carlyn, would you like to take a moment to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your festival submission for this year?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Carlyn Rhamey. Pronouns are she, they. And I am really excited to bring the ADHD Project to Fringe North this year. It's a show I've been doing for quite a few years now. It's true storytelling. So I'm telling true stories from my life about growing up with ADHD. I call it a comedy about growing up a little bit special. I was in special education classrooms growing up, and it's kind of the story of how I came above some of the adversity with bullying and school and some of the symptoms of ADHD, which I go into too. I explained a little bit about how ADHD works in the brain, and it's a family-friendly show, kind of growing up and going through that and coming out on the other side with, I'm striving to now be an advocate for ADHD, and that's kind of my story of learning how to do that. So a very long explanation.
That sounds really exciting, and I am really thrilled to have you as part of our festival this year. How did the project come to be, and what made you want to step into that advocation role for ADHD?
Yeah, well, I've always loved theater, and I have a passion for that, and because I grew up having ADHD, it got me really interested in working with people with disabilities and other kids with ADHD as well. So I kind of wanted a way that I could kind of combine my two passions. And when I discovered storytelling, I just fell in love with it because, storytelling is all about connection, and it's all about you either you're relating to someone on stage in the stories they're telling, or you're learning something from their lived experience, and I just love that so much about it. I think it's so special, and so I thought that after I did my first solo show, I kind of got the bug for it, and I got the hang of it, and so I thought I want to tell my story with ADHD, because there's not a lot of great representations of it. Anything that I've ever seen on TV about ADHD has been, a young boy who's really hyperactive, and that's just like one very stereotypical view of it, and only one version of ADHD. It's a full long spectrum, and so I really wanted to share a more broader view of what it is, and the symptoms, and the people who have it.
Yeah, that's really wonderful to hear. Yeah, I find in mainstream culture, it's a lot of like the view on it is that you can't focus, when actually it's a hypersensitivity to focus. So when you're really passionate about something, you can focus more than the average person for sure. And
Yeah.
like it's not, the full picture of it isn't really represented in media. So it's really exciting to see you provide that and to take that step into that sphere. So I'm curious, in terms of your own experience as well as those that you've met, was it the project is more focused on your experience with ADHD, or because you did say that you talk about like the way that the brain functions and those pieces as well. So what is that balance like throughout the piece?
Yeah, it's the best description of it was one reviewer called it an entertaining TED Talk, because it is storytelling, it is stories, and not all the stories are directly related to ADHD. I'd say, I'm telling stories of my childhood and going to school, and when I had to start advocating for myself. And so it's a lot of that. And then I did want to, add that educational aspect, because one, I wanted to perform it in schools, which I do now. So the performance that I've sent to Fringe North is a performance for school. So it can still be consumed by adults or kids, but I wanted to make sure I sent in a version that was kind of good for all ages. So this is the version I do in schools. So it does have the educational aspect. And for me, that was important too, because I think that people think it's a behavioral disorder, when really it's it's a chemical imbalance in the brain. And, there's not a lot of things we can do to change that, other than, we've got strategies and there's medication, and everyone's route to how they combat those symptoms of ADHD is different. But I wanted to be able to kind of explain the causes of ADHD, how it functions in the brain, and kind of go through all the symptoms, as many as I could, because there is so many. I try and hit the big ones.
Yeah, and I find it interesting, like that you use that word combat the symptoms, and sometimes it's not so much about combating them, but learning how to use them for good and like the benefit side of it as well, right? So, because I really liked when I was reading your description, you called it your superpower at one point, and I think that that's awesome. So, just for a little bit of your knowledge of my background, I work as a life coach as well, so I do have
Ah, lovely.
clients, and I'm in the space a little bit. So, like,
Hmm.
learning how to use it, and the potential that it brings, that other people don't have that same potential, and how to use it for good and use it to get towards your goals in those different pieces, rather than viewing it all as like that negative side of things that can sometimes come up.
Yeah, I think it's got. I think the weaknesses, and the strengths, they balance each other out.
Hmm.
And a big part of that, and I say this in the show after my land acknowledgement, is this is just my story with ADHD, and it's just one story with ADHD. There are so many different ones, and mine is a very privileged one. And so I know that in disability circles, some people don't like it being called a superpower, and I think it's important that you do recognize the strengths. You can for sure acknowledge, the weaknesses, and it can be hard. It's still hard. I'm 30 years old. It's still hard, but I am really grateful and thankful for the strengths, because it was the positive things about ADHD that made me who I am, and also pushed me to find a career that I'm passionate about.
Yeah, that's really exciting. So how did you get into the artistic space, and like what has your journey with theater been like as well?
Yeah, I've been storytelling for about 5 years now. So I've also been touring on the Fringe circuit for about 5 years. I tend to normally in the summers I go all across Canada, and it's great because I get to kind of test out material with all different types of communities and audiences. And before that, I primarily I was doing plays and acting, and I loved it. And I love so many different aspects of theater. My dream is to become a therapeutic clown, because again, it's blending both of things I love. But yeah, what I mentioned before about storytelling, it just rings, it rings true to who I am. I think my type of performing, I it's just me on stage. I don't have a lot of different texts, or mostly I just have a like a whatchamacallit, oh, projector. Brain. I have a projector on, and it's showing. And throughout the performance that I've sent as well, I have pictures of my old report cards, and old artwork as a kid, and home videos. So I've included all that in the show, and I think that just adds an extra level of honesty, because I think that is one of the most important things, when you're talking about things like ADHD, when there isn't a lot of information, and there's a whole lot of misinformation and stereotypes. And so the best thing you can do is just be honest about your experience, acknowledge that it's just your experience. But I found the best, feedback I've gotten is from the stories that are, simple and relatable. And having my report cards up there and having people be like, oh my gosh, mine said the exact same thing. I'm like, oh, okay. Because when I first did the show, I was like, is anyone gonna relate to this like this? I have no idea. Again, like, I had never seen anyone talk about ADHD past the point of the kid on the cartoon that is now taking Ritalin. So I was really shocked by the amount of support, and the amount that people related. And I think, that's why I love storytelling. That's why I fell in love with it, because I saw someone telling a story on stage that made me feel seen and made me see that other person.
It's really exciting. And having a background with having gone to tours in most summers and whatnot, and now being in like the digital sphere, how are you finding sort of that like shift to being present in the digital world and to still keep like the heart of theater there, and what has your process with that been like?
It's definitely different. I'm starting to recognize, there's a lot of advantages to having your work filmed, and being able to edit it the way you want and being able to send that out to, places that you might not be able to get to. Like I've never done Fringe North before. And so this is such an exciting opportunity for me because I actually get to put my work out there into this whole new community and whole new group of audiences. But not having an audience is super tough, and it's very tough if you're a comedic performer like myself because a lot of the times I'm not a stand-up. I'm not good enough to know when something I write is funny. Usually when I'm writing something, what I think is funny isn't funny. But people laugh at other things and I'm like, oh, okay, that's a joke. I meant that serious, but that's great. So I get a lot of feedback, from the audience, and they really, really, I always say that like they are my collaborators. I don't finish a show until I'm able to put it up in front of an audience 100 times. And I'm lucky that I've gotten to do that for years with the ADHD Project. So when the film version that I have, is a school show, and I've been able to do it so many times on the circuit as well. But yeah, it's definitely when you're working on new material or testing out a new story, it's really tricky without that audience feedback because they're your acting partner in a way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think it's really like neat that people who usually couldn't be a part of our festival are able to this year because of the digital format, which is really exciting. Um, I'm curious as to your background with bringing it to schools, and what sparked uh, like what steps did you take to get there, and what was that journey like to actually get it out in front of kids and to get, because I know some school boards can be kind of difficult sometimes to like break into, so I'm just curious around that.
Yeah. Well, when we wrote this, I wrote the show in 2017, and my director also has ADHD. I'm ADHD inattentive, and he's ADHD impulsivity hyperactivity. So we got both sides. And I wrote it with the intention of it being family friendly, so that we could eventually bring it into schools. And then we've kind of since then developed two versions of it. We've got the shorter version for online and specifically for more all ages. And then the performance I do live is a lot longer. I mean, it's a full hour, and that one tends to skew a little bit older, probably like 12 up. So it's nice that we have got these two versions. For schools, I got really lucky. I was on a panel for a woman in adventure, because my first solo show was all about traveling on my own for the first time. And so I was on that panel, and a woman came up to me and she said, oh, like, have you ever heard of Prologue to the Performing Arts? And I hadn't, and they are a organization based in the GTA, but essentially they have a roster of performances for schools, and they go all across Ontario, so anyone can book them from anywhere in Ontario. And so I've been performing in schools of Prologue Arts for about 3 years now, which is really great. So during the year I do that, and in the summers I fringe. So it's been really wonderful to have be able to keep telling stories all year round.
That's awesome. So when you're in schools, and this is kind of a two-part question, but when you're in schools, what do you hope that kids take away from your project? And also within Fringe festivals, like, does that stay the same across, or are you hoping to convey a little bit of a different message in each version?
That's a good question. I think with students especially, and because the ADHD project was, written with that in mind of taking it to schools, I hope they see it, and they feel, because it's the goal is that whatever it is that makes you different, it's something that you should be proud of. It's something that you should be, whether it's something that you're struggling with, or something that just makes you a little bit more unique in your class. I hope that it helps students embrace who they are, and not be ashamed, because I know I carried a lot of shame as a kid growing up. And I hope they, see their differences as their strengths and their superpowers, which is what I have in my little blurb there. And for the adult version, I hope I'm able to still give that same message, and then also along with that a little bit more of a, I'm honest about the weaknesses too. There's always that tricky thing in the ADHD disability community. It's really split down the middle right now of people saying, no, it's a disability, it's really hard. And people saying, no, it's my superpower, it's only good things. And I don't think it's one or the other, it's really both, it's both equally. It really depends on your privilege and your access to resources and strategies, for sure. Whether you get diagnosed as a kid or an adult, but I think in the end, I hope I'm giving a honest, an honest representation of it. And for the students especially, I hope I'm giving them some hope too, because, I think I'm not going to go into a school and say that it's going to be hard for the rest of their lives. They already know that. They're already freaking struggling. They get it. That's I would have loved for someone to come in and say, validate my struggles, say that it's okay, tell me to forgive myself, and then tell me that I will have opportunities, that I will have so much more things to achieve if I, can, find my hyper focus, or, acknowledge my strengths too. I think that's really important, that we're showing kids that, what makes them different is a strength, because it is.
Yeah, for sure. And to have like that honest evaluation of looking at both sides rather than getting caught up in one or the other, because I think that that's so important for all of us in life. Like, there's good and bad in everything, and it's being honest about that and authentic about the good and the bad in life, rather than just getting caught up in kind of like that Eeyore mentality of everything's bad, or like that super like everything's good, and then when it's not, you're like trying to force yourself to see it as good, and it just gets exhausting.
Yeah. I mean, there's no cure for ADHD. This is how I was born. I can't change it, and I don't think I would, even if I could, because because of it, and because of the adversity I faced, and what I still go through, it makes me a more empathetic person. It makes me better at being a storyteller, being able to connect, and I think it does the same thing to a lot of neurodiverse people. And I also am in the mindset too of, our brains are different, and that makes the world around us is a struggle sometimes, but maybe it's the world that has to change, not us. And I hope we are slowly moving in a direction that makes our society a little bit more neurodiverse friendly. It's a slow process, but the more accessible our world becomes for disabled and neurodiverse folks, and the more I think it'll be better enjoyed by everyone, neurotypicals alike. So
Yeah, for sure. That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Um, so what are you hoping that viewers at Fringe North specifically take away from your show, and what are you hoping of getting out of the festival, being an artist yourself too? Like what do you hope festival goers get, and what do you hope you get out of being a part of this?
I hope, even though I can't be there, I hope I can get a sense of, um, Fringe North, because I would love to come in person one day. And so I'm really excited to check out the other shows. I haven't had a chance to go through yet, because as I was telling you before, this is the last day of Hamilton Fringe, so my brain has been in that. But as soon as it's done, I'm really looking forward to kind of checking out what shows are being offered at Fringe North, especially local shows. I like seeing what local artists are doing. And then for audiences, I guess this is the first time they're meeting me, which is exciting. Hi. I hope they take a chance on a show by someone they've never met. I mean, that's the joy of Fringe, is just taking a risk on a show. And, if it's the worst show you've ever seen, you got a story. And if it's the best show you've ever seen, you're probably going to forget about it next week. But I hope that they maybe like learn something from the show, gained a little bit insight into someone whose life and brain is a little bit different than their own, and then if they are struggling with neurodiversity or mental health themselves, or something that makes them feel like they don't fit in, whether them or they're a kid or they're a teacher, or they know someone. Hopefully they can pass it on to someone who would really benefit from the message, and someone who needs to know that they're not alone. Because I think that's the biggest thing that I've gotten from audiences is, I've had so many people come up to me after the show and just say that they've never seen their story on stage before. And I always encourage them to go. They should go and tell their story, whether that's through art or theater or music, however that is. But it's really special, and I don't take it lightly, being able to talk about this and have audiences that come and listen. And again, that's why I say, it's just one viewpoint of ADHD, but being able to give that to people. And I know that growing up, that's what I would have needed and really benefited from, had I seen someone come in and say, it, more than just it gets better, just be honest and say, yeah, you're right, you're struggling with these things, and sometimes it's funny and sometimes it sucks, and but that you will find your place. Your route there is going to be a little bit different.
That's wonderful. So I'm just noticing the time. Is there any last thoughts that you want viewers to know about your show, or about your journey as an artist, or anything like that?
I would just say, like, again, it is a school performance, but it is, it's for adults as well. So don't let that put you off. It follows pretty much me from my diagnosis up until, this version goes right up until I think my grade 8 graduation, and then a little bit after that. And it's a short. I think it's only about 35 minutes, because I know, being on Zoom, and they'll be consuming a lot of shows, so I want it to be snappy. It does move quickly. There's a lot of stories packed in that. I hope that you can check it out, and that you relate to it or learn something, or maybe a little bit of both. And it's a comedy, so just come and hear stories. It's gonna be fun. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for coming on today and for your time. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure all of our viewers appreciate it as well. And to those watching, thank you for taking the time to watch. Miigwech, merci, gracias. And the festival is running from August 19th to the 22nd, so come buy a ticket and support Carlyn. Have a great day. We'll see you again soon. Thank you for watching our podcast. Merci, miigwech, gracias. If you like what we're doing, you can support Fringe North and the artists involved in this year's festival financially, so that we can continue this work. Visit www.fringenorth.ca to find out more.